Hey everyone, it's Susan Pierce Thompson and welcome to the weekly vlog. So I'm doing something dangerous this week. I'm turning on the camera without a mental bullet list of things I want to talk about. Yeah, dangerous. So this week marks 15 years of bright line eating for me. 15 years that I've been putting my food on the scale, not eating sugar and flour, bounding my quantities, eating my committed meals, writing down my food the night before, the next day eating only and exactly that. 15 years, 5,480 days today. And actually, I've been in food recovery for 22 and a half years, since I was 21 years old. I had about 9 months clean and sober, and I marched myself down to a 12-step food program because I knew that food was my real drug. And I've been thinking about food as a drug and doing my best to recover from food addiction for 22 and a half years. The reason that I claim 15 years is that that's when I really got clear that sugar, flour, meals, and quantities were the lines, and I had to really stick to them. Up till then, I wasn't really around anybody who was telling me that, and I didn't figure it out on my own. I did figure out sugar, for sure, but I was still lying to myself and eating yogurt with fruit on the bottom and barbecue sauce and a bunch of stuff that had a ton of sugar in it, so I wasn't really getting well. I had figured out white flour, but I hadn't figured out brown flour, and yeah, and I was still messing around and I just hadn't figured it out, right? I just didn't get to it on my own. Other people had to tell me sugar, flour, meals, quantities, cut it out. Here's what you do. Here's a food plan. Weigh and measure your food. And I was like, okay. So that was 15 years ago. It was May 21st of 2003. I walked into a tiny little 12-step meeting for food addiction and, got abstinent and started doing this thing. And I want to read something. This is a call prep form from somebody who was in my platinum coaching group. And something else that's happening this week is I had the last official call of the Bright Line Eating Platinum Coaching Group. And, I should tell you a little bit about what that is. Basically, when I started the first boot camp, I capped it to just 40 people. This was in October of 2014. And there's people still, living in a right-sized body who are in that boot camp. At the end of that boot camp, which was 40 people, the boot camp was coming to a close, and I hadn't thought about what next. And I knew that these people weren't waltzing into the future happy, thin, and free off, at the time. That boot camp was 6 weeks. It's been expanded to longer now, but I knew that. And I hadn't really thought that far. I was kind of making all this up as I went along. So I quickly put together, we could do a weekly ongoing thing together. And I called it the Platinum Coaching Group, and people joined. And I've reached a point now, basically, where that's not what we do anymore. When people get done with the boot camp, they go into Bright Lifers. And 2/3 of the people who get, I do a webinar at the end of the boot camp, and I say, hey, do you want to join Bright Lifers? Here's what it is. 2/3 of the people are like, oh, heck yeah, I'm in. And we don't have the Platinum Coaching Group anymore, but I kept it alive it was just that original group of 40. We kept it alive. Obviously, not everyone joined it. Not everyone's still in it, but everyone who's still in it is living in a right-sized body and has been for a long time. And every week, for a while it was every week. We cut it back to twice a month. We had this little group that was going on for an hour on Tuesdays at noon, and I'd have them send in a call prep form before the call so they could just sort of take account. And the first question is, how am I today, right now? How have I been since our last call? And this woman wrote on her form this week for our last official call, I'm well, solid lines, thank you God. Number 2, what outcomes do I want to celebrate? And she wrote, I've been reflecting on the whole journey lately as I think about our platinum group drawing to a close this month. And I'm celebrating the deep awareness that my bright lines are a fundamental necessity for me, that I will be living out one meal at a time, one day at a time, for the rest of my life. They are both the inner and outer expression of my commitment to live my life in fullness, in well-being, in service. My physical, spiritual, emotional, volitional well-being rests in my ongoing commitment to live every day as an addict in recovery. Question number 3. Have I stuck to my bright lines since our last call? Yes. What day am I on? Day 1,377 of bright line eating, day 647 of maintenance. So this is a woman who is over 2 years living in a right-sized body now and used to weigh, well over 250 pounds and now weighs like $125, 125, sometimes, between 125 and 130 is her goal range. Like used to be morbidly obese, like obesity class 3, and is now in a right-sized body, living happy, thin, and free, completely peacefully. And I just wanted to turn on the camera and just share a little bit about, with this anniversary of me having 15 years doing this, sometimes perfectly, sometimes very imperfectly, as I've been very candid about in this vlog, and reading her form. I think she's had a break or two here and there, not perfect bright lines all that time, but has gotten right back on track and has found ways of supporting herself and getting accountability. She's the one I spoke about in an accountability vlog a little while ago, where I talked about every morning, her husband says, "Did you keep your bright lines last night?" And she says, "Yes, I did." And just with that question every morning, she's got enough accountability to not eat off her plan, because she gamed the system and realized, wait a second, I always eat off plan at night. And if my husband knows I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it. So that's all I got to do is have him ask me a question in the morning. Did you stick with your plan last night? And that's it. So anyway, same woman. So what am I thinking about here? 22 and a half years down this road, 15 years doing bright line eating. And when I say doing bright line eating, of course, bright line eating has only existed for under 4 years, 3.5 years. So it wasn't called that back then. And I've been very clear that bright line eating is derived from my scientific background, my 12-step background, and then the sort of entrepreneurial movement building background of online sort of movements that are springing up now around the world. So it's got these sort of 3 heritages. Anyway, if I had a lesson to share at this moment, it would be define your journey in a way that serves you. It really comes back to the self-authoring mind that I was talking about in a recent vlog, Faith and Adult Development. I was talking about the self-authoring mind, not socialized mind, where you just take on other people's definitions. That's okay at first. I think for kids, it's fine. What else have they got, right? They got to figure out the way the world works, so they suck it up from their environment. But at a certain point in your bright line eating journey, you have to own your journey. And you have to look it all over with a fine-tooth comb and say, am I defining this? Am I doing this in a way that serves me? And you have to cut out the stuff that doesn't serve you, and you have to search for the stuff that makes it work for you. And here's what I've learned for me. In my old 12-step food addiction program, which I was in solidly for over 11 years, and then I formed Bright Line Eating. I was still in it for a while, and then started 2 or 3 years of trying to figure out how to do it without that support, without that program. And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth many times. And every time I went back, it kind of helped a little, but then it didn't. It didn't serve me. And what I found was that I had to sort of really analyze, what is it that they're doing over there that does serve me? What is it that works for me? And what I found was it's the environment of being with a bunch of people who are committed to this way of life and don't ever deviate from it. And it's the system of rules that everybody adopts over there that says, if you eat off your plan, there are consequences, social consequences. If you eat off your plan, you can't be a sponsor anymore and you have to drop all your sponsees. If you eat off your plan, you can't speak at a meeting for 90 days. If you eat off your plan, You can't do service work at your meeting, so you have to drop all your service commitments, and it affects everybody around you because there aren't that many people in the meeting, so then other people have to pick up your service commitments. If you eat off your plan, within a few days, everybody that you know in that program will know. People will call and they'll tell each other, and they will think of you differently, which means that, I'm not saying all this is a good thing, bear with me. What it means that is that as the fork is thinking about whether it wants to make its way to my mouth, there's a thought that happens that says there's consequences to that bite. That bite. I'm not talking about the vague consequences of if I overeat, I'll feel bloated tomorrow morning. I might look fat for a vlog that I got to shoot next week. I won't feel as good about myself in the morning. Those are consequences to like all the bites. I don't mean those consequences. I mean the consequence to that bite, the first one. Because if you're an addict, it's the first one that does you in. It's not the 10th drink that gets an alcoholic drunk. It's the first drink that gets an alcoholic drunk. That's what makes him an alcoholic, right? So if you have an addicted brain like I do, and I'm not saying you do, I do. I'm a 10 plus on the susceptibility scale. We all know that, right? I'm certifiable. For me, there's a benefit in being in a social environment in which the first bite has consequences. Consequences beyond I might gain weight and not feel as good, because for some reason those consequences don't come to mind when that fork is on its way to my mouth. They don't. I don't know why. I think it's strange. I have incredibly high self-esteem, and not the baloney kind where I think, blah, blah, blah about myself. I mean like the real kind of like, I genuinely love myself. I genuinely value myself. I genuinely strive to treat myself well. I'm very good about weeding out things in my life that are harmful or that, people that are toxic or what, like I'm good at that stuff. I love myself. I treat myself well. I'm not in the business of harming myself. I'm really not. I've done the work, therapy for a bazillion years, umpty times through the 12 steps. So I guess what I'm saying is it's strange to me that the fact that fundamentally it's an act of self-harm to eat off my plan doesn't come in to deter me in that moment. But the reality for me is that it doesn't. I think that's weird. I don't know why it doesn't, but it doesn't. Because in that moment, there's a part of my brain that says, there's a hit available and it's that big and it's right there and you could have it. And right at this moment, that'd be a good thing because this stressor and that stressor and rah, 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 rah. So it's helpful for me to be in an environment, a social environment, in which that first bite matters. Because what I've learned in Bright Line Eating over the last few years is I'm a really good resumer. I can fall off the wagon and get back on. I can fall off the wagon, gain a few pounds, get back on track, get right back into a right-sized body, and time to shoot a vlog and be good to go. I really can do that. I don't like to do that. Doing that is awful. It sucks. I'm not a fan. And does it make me feel out of integrity? Heck yeah, of course. I'm like the grand poobah of Bright Line Eating. Oh, whatever, right? Like, yeah, it's weird to like watch myself eat off plan knowing that my value core is to never do that. But it's interesting to me as a scientist who's watching this whole thing that value core, when that fork is on its way to my mouth, is irrelevant. The part of my brain that cares about my integrity is somehow not available in that moment. It doesn't mean that I don't have integrity. It means I'm an addict. So the fork is coming to my mouth, and there has to be some reason, some social environment that I have placed myself in which that bite matters. Like my friend from the Platinum Coaching Group, where if she takes that bite, the next morning she has to tell her husband, I ate off plan last night, honey. That's what I mean, a social environment in which the first bite matters. So, the thing is about that 12-step program is I've been unhappy with the way that it's structured there because I worry that it hurts people. Like I go to meetings, I've been to meetings, I still, once in a while will drop in at a meeting because I know a lot of people there, and I'll go to a meeting and I'll sit there and I'll look around the room and it's like, okay, 3/4 of the people in this room can't speak because they don't have 90 days of consecutive abstinence. There's the same people at the front of the room speaking every week, and it's really working for them. Many of them have 10, 20, 30 years of back-to-back abstinence. And then the rest have like a year or, 2 years or whatever. And then there's all these other people who are either staying heavy or they've lost some weight or they're in some form of slipping around with it. And they're silenced. They can't speak. And I know a lot of those people. And my heart has gone out over the years watching them really struggle with their self-concept because they're in an environment that labels them as a failure. Not the individual people in the program, but the environment itself is set up so that if you're in that social context and you're not keeping consecutive abstinence, you come to believe about yourself that you're a failure, that you don't love yourself, you don't value yourself, and you're not really doing what it takes to be a worthwhile person. And I worry about them. So I've been thinking in Bright Line Eating because I've watched in Bright Lifers in particular. Bright Lifers, there's about 4,000 Bright Lifers right now, and it's our sort of core. These are the people who've done a boot camp and they're staying close to the mothership. And I'm in Bright Lifers, and we have a Facebook group where we post. We have a lot of smaller Facebook groups for special interest, around whatever, exercise, eating disorders, men, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in Bright Lifers. And I'm thinking, how can we recreate within Bright Lifers the social environment that sort of gamifies the whole addiction thing, that makes it so that that first bite matters in a way that will show up to the brain that's on its way to get the hit. That crazy brain where the switch has already flipped. And it's the brain that wants a hit. How can we create a social environment that's so strong and so compelling that that first bite won't be taken, without creating a social environment that results in people feeling ostracized and feeling like a failure and feeling shamed and feeling like that? I don't want that. And furthermore, I've also noticed that for myself, the closer I am to the 12-step model where you have to have 90 days of back-to-back abstinence to be sort of, a seen, contributing member of the community, the more I've noticed that if I do eat off plan, the binge is way worse. Because if you think about the logic here for a second, this is my saboteur talking, I get that. But if you've just eaten off plan, and you're not really anything until you have 90 days, you better get your eating in now, because it's going to take a long time to get those 90 days. And if you still haven't eaten this and this and this, and now you got a dinner party next week and you're taking a trip, well, you better just wait for a little bit to even try again. And it really sort of exacerbates what we call in psychology the what the hell effect, right? So wouldn't it be great if we designed a system that the very nature of the social construct that was making that first bite of food not a good idea also incentivized getting back on track quickly instead of not quickly, right? Instead of thinking, well, I've broken it now and I'm not going to have 90 days for practically forever is what my brain is telling me, so I might as well eat everything now, right? I noticed this a while back. I went back to that 12-step program and my binges got worse. They absolutely got worse. So anyway, enter the Gideon Games. Now I'm going to tell you about this, and I'm sorry you're not eligible to be in the Gideon Games. It's only for Bright Lifers. We're running a little pilot. So this is mean of me. I'm sorry. But I think the point is illustrative, because you could form your own Gideon Games, or you could go through the boot camp and join Bright Lifers and then actually be eligible for the Gideon Games. But here's what I came up with. And this is an idea that I had actually like a year and a half ago. And then on a morning accountability call, this is something that we do with Bright Lifers every morning. We get on the phone for a little bit, 15 minutes. It usually goes longer. And I coach somebody, or someone on my team coaches somebody. We've got 3 of us who do these accountability calls every morning. And people listen to the recordings. The Bright Lifers listen to the recordings if they can't do it at that particular time. So there was an accountability call last June 22nd where we fleshed out this idea. More recently, I named it the Gideon Games. It's not meant to be a biblical nod. It's Gideon was a guy, his Old Testament, right? Old Testament guy who there was very tumultuous times. Like the land was in disarray. And he amassed an army, and God said, make it smaller. And then he got that army, and God said, no, make it smaller. And so he ended up with this tiny, tiny, tiny little army of completely volunteer, completely dedicated soldiers. And through incredible faith and creativity and unstoppability, they conquered, and they ushered in an era of peace that lasted for decades and decades and decades. So based on sort of the small group being really knitted together and unstoppable, I created this thing called the Gideon Games. So here's what the Gideon Games are. Teams of 10 people, led by one person who has to have 6 months of squeaky clean consecutive bright lines. You see, so we're gamifying. You get 6 months, you can be a team leader. 10 people, 90 days, lots of teams. And it's a contest. Every person, every day who has a bright line day gets 1 point. No bright line day, 0 points. 10 people, 90 days, 900 possible points. The team with the most points wins. That simple. Now, at first, a lot of bright lifers were like, but I'm not competitive. And what we've found, we're doing a pilot right now of the Gideon Games. We've got 10 teams, so there's 100 bright lifers who are trying this out. I'm one of them. I'm on a team. I'm a member of a team. And I haven't broken my bright line since they've started. And 8 out of 10 people on my team have not broken their bright line since it started. One person has had one day that was a break, and another person has had one day that was a break, and that's it. And I'm looking at the leaderboard, and it's like, so, for a week, it's 70 points that a team could get. Every week, the teams are getting 70 points, 68 points, 69 points, 70 points. The spread between the top place team and the bottom place team is like only a couple days of difference in bright lines. And basically, just about everyone's keeping their lines. Now, we have someone on our team who hadn't had a bright line day in 5 months when the Gideon Games started. She's kept her bright lines every day since it started. We had someone else who hadn't had a bright line day in weeks. She was eating a 4th meal at the end of the day. She was just going out, partying and going out dancing and stuff. And she'd get hungry and she'd eat a 4th meal. And she was doing it every night. And she, the Gideon Games have been going for a while now. She's had one break where she ate that 4th meal. But every other day since then, every other day, she's had a bright line day. So what I've noticed is that the Gideon Games, for me, have created again that social environment where that first bite matters. And all the people who aren't competitive are noticing they're not breaking their bright lines, not because they want to win, but because they don't want to let down their team members. They're not competitive, but they're codependent, right? So the Gideon Games supports people alike who are, competitive like me. I want to win. I'm competitive. You would guess that about me, right? Like, oh yeah, straight up, I want to win these things. But then there's other people on the team who aren't eating because they know that I want to win, or they know that someone else, there's a few of us who really want to win this thing. And then everybody else is banding together because they don't want to let us down, right? And what happens is we have a Google sheet for our team where everybody's putting in their point at the end of the night. So if someone didn't have a bright line day, that 0 goes in and our team leader puts a heart by it. So sweet. And then guess who we know to call the next day? And love them up and work it through and help them, use the permission to be human action plan, which is in the back of my book, and, or in the boot camp. And, think about the 4 S's: speed, social support, self-compassion, seek the lesson. And all of a sudden, we become rock star resumers in the context of a small group of people. We're making phone calls together. Every weekend, we're doing a live video chat together. We've got a Facebook Messenger group where we post. We've got a regular Facebook group where we post. We're calling each other. We've got a phone list. So the 10 of us are supporting each other like gangbusters. And it is remarkable. And it incentivizes getting back on track quickly. And it's all about fun and competition and support. And somehow this, I'm just going to call it stupid, this stupid little contest, right? I mean, it's not fancy. What are we winning? Who cares, right? Like, it's just you win. There is a prize, but it's amazing how this little context, the social environment that I'm in, makes that bite of food not worth it. I'm not taking it. Like, what's happened is, since the Gideon Games have started, is when stress comes up, and I have to say, since the Gideon Games have started, I've had an unusually stressful life. Like, just some stuff has come down the pike that before the Gideon Games, I'm just saying, I would have eaten over. Like, the stress, this is one of the other things I've learned in 15 years is the amount of stress absolutely matters. It just does. Like, yeah, it was easy relatively for me to stick with my bright lines for 6, 8 years in a row, no breaks at all ever. Because frankly, I had sort of put myself in a padded cell where I was just inoculated from a lot of the stressors, and my support was so high that my stress bar, even when it did start to creep, it never even came close to the support bar. Like, my stress bar was always low relative to support. So I kept my bright lines unbroken for years and 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 years. Since Bright Line Eating started, and I've been doing what I have to do to grow this movement, my stress bar is the one that's high, and I'm always trying to push my support bar up high enough, and within that context, there's breaks. So it's another thing I've learned is the environment absolutely matters, both in terms of stress and also in terms of the social context in which that first bite of food matters. So if you want to do the Gideon Games for real, there is only one way to do it right now, and that's to go through the boot camp and then to become a Bright Lifer and then hop in. We're doing it quarterly, and the pilot's happening right now, but it's just the world's biggest success. Everybody in Bright Lifers is clamoring to get into the next round. And if you're not going to do that, and you think something like this would be helpful for you, I encourage you to think about the principles involved and the lesson involved. It means creating a social context in which the first bite of food matters, not just because it matters to you, but because it matters to other people. You can go back and listen to my vlog on 6 ways to be accountable in Bright Line Eating, just not that long ago, where I talk about ways to create a social environment where the first bite of food matters, I'm very grateful to have squeaky clean bright lines, again, to feel that kind of automaticity. I'm going to turn on the camera again next week and talk more about what I've learned after 15 years of Bright Line Eating. This was part 1. I've got some more to share about it, and I'm going to leave that for next week. So until then, have a good week.